everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Rocking Midlife Podcast. And I'm so glad you're here. I know that you ladies are really going to be wanting to tune in today. In fact, not just the ladies or the gentlemen need to be listening in too, so you understand what's happening in the ladies' worlds, because we're going to be talking around the topic of menopause. And I'm joined by an amazing guest, Dr. Cari Schaefer. And I want to quickly say, welcome, Cari.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
I'm really excited to have you here. Obviously, menopause is such a hot topic for women in the midlife age group. And I really love how you've reframed it, just reading your notes, talking about transitions. So we're going to dive into that in just a minute. But before we do, I just want to encourage you, please make sure to like, to subscribe, to leave a great review, and make sure you're thinking now who you can be sharing this episode with, because there's going to be a whole lot of little gems, I'm sure, today that are really going to help. So let me tell you just a quick little bit about Dr. Cari. So Dr. Cari is the founder of Wise Woman Emerging, a platform midwifing women. Now, I have to say straight up, I just loved that expression when I read that, Cari. Midwifing women through the menopausal chain. And she's a women's healthcare provider. She's a lecturer. She's a teacher on health and nutrition. And she's the author of an Amazon best-selling book called The Food Solution. So, Cari, the menopause transition. What is it? What's your story? How is it that you're doing what you do now?
Yeah, so I was on a long health journey. And when I hit 40, I went to my doctor and I decided I was still like 32 to 42 were sort of the big heavy years where I was working my way back to health. So 40, I'm better, but there's still some stuff going on. So I go to my gynecologist for my yearly and I decide I'm going to tell her, about what's going on. Usually I kind of don't, because I know they're not really going to offer me many solutions. So I gave her a list of what's going on and she looks at me and she goes, "So how old are you again?" And I said 40. And she goes, "Oh, okay." She goes, perimenopause, just going down the symptoms. Perimenopause. Oh, you need to go to a chiropractor. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And she
That's
said,
random.
I can give you,
How many doctors would recommend that?
Right, I know. Well, we're in LA.
Yeah.
So I can give you the pill. I don't really prescribe bioidentical hormones, but I can give you the pill. And other than that, you just sort of have to live through it. And I was like, okay. So I left. And by the time I was 45, I had none of the symptoms that I had when I was 40 years old that she said was all related to perimenopause. So fast forward, I'm now 48 and I'm much, much healthier. I'm healthier than I've been in many years. And one of my doctors says to me, "Hey, Cari, why don't you come to Ithaca, New York and come see me, and then you can attend this detox center that I teach at every year. I think it'll be fun." And I'm not a big fan of those kind of drastic detoxes, but I was like, well, I'm doing better. I've gained some weight. I was often underweight, and maybe it'll be fun. I'll go, right? So I go, and by the time I leave we don't have all day today, so I'll keep it short. But by the time I leave the detox center, and my body is not in good shape. I had dropped 10 pounds. I was severely dehydrated. And when I got on the plane to go home, I don't love little planes, but I've flown on them. But I got on the plane to go home and we landed and they shut off the engines and they kept the door shut and it kept getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And there was a baby that was next to me. He started screaming and people were standing up and they were fanning themselves. And I started to get panicky. And throughout my years of sickness, anxiety was never one of my things. So here I'm getting panicky. And finally I yell, like, "Open the door." And they do. So I get home, and after that, I start to notice that when I walk into small spaces, I get that same panicky feeling.
Wow.
It got to the point where I couldn't get into elevators. I couldn't go into parking garages. I couldn't get into the backseat of cars. And I thought it was all just stress from this detox. Like maybe I had a bunch of heavy metals in my brain. I didn't know, but I thought it was just stress from the detox. So I was going about getting myself better, but it was being slow. And I had a patient come in and she goes, "Cari, I've had this weird thing." And she's a patient of mine for long term, so I've known her. And I said, "I have this weird thing." And I said, "What's that?" She said, "Well, I started getting like claustrophobia. I can't get into elevators. I can't get into the backseat of cars and parking garages. Forget it." And I was like, okay, that's weird. And she said, "I went online and I Googled it. and I read that it could be a sign of perimenopause. And I was like,
Seriously, I've never heard of that.
exactly,
Wow.
right? So here I'm a medical professional.
Yeah.
I've been studying hormones for years. I've been balancing out women's hormones for years, and I had never heard of this either. So I was like, okay, wait a second. I got to go down this rabbit hole. So I went down and I started researching again, because when I was in school, what we know, menopause and perimenopause has not been studied a lot in Western medicine, and in Chinese medicine, which is my background, there was a lot more. But basically they talked about your menses getting irregular and getting cranky and maybe some PMS and drying out, right? But they didn't never talked about this kind of stuff, right? So I started joining Facebook groups and I started hearing what these women were talking about. I was like, holy moly. So I signed up for every course I could take on the subject. And one of the functional medicine groups that I belonged to was having this woman come in who was supposed to be the expert in bioidentical hormone replacement for women. And she'd written a book on the subject. So I went in, and I'm sitting there halfway back the room, and she stands up and she starts her talk by saying, from a biological and anthropological perspective. Now, listeners, hang on, because, I'm about to say something that's pretty shocking. Women are done post childbearing years. Done. That's the word. DONE, done. And I was like, what? Now it gets better. So at the end, she said, any questions? I raised my hand and I said, so her solution was to keep women on very high levels of bioidentical hormones and keep them bleeding into life. And I was like, okay. So how long do you keep them bleeding? And she's like, well, my mother is still bleeding. Now, this woman was well into her 60s. So how old was her mother who is still bleeding? And so something inside of me said, oh my gosh, we have so lost connection with this process, right? So I started speaking on this, and I started, educating myself more and learning about it and talking and saying, hey, look, this isn't a problem. This is a divine plan of nature. And then the man who had put on this functional medicine group emailed me, and he said, hey, Cari, she's coming back. Do you want to hear her? And I said, hey, quite truthfully, I found her pretty offensive. And I said, her whole perspective. And he said, well, I can understand that. He said, some species die after giving birth. And I was like, oh, what? Gosh. Like, are you kidding me? And I wrote back, I couldn't help myself. I said, yeah, some species eat their mate after mating.
Yes, I thought exactly that at the same time.
Yeah, we're human beings. We do not do that. And women are anything but done.
We're not praying mantises, all right?
Exactly. Or widows, right? No, we don't do that, right? Yes. And so I realized we have a big problem. Yes. Our culture has completely lost the purpose of menopause, why women go through the transition, and that we go through the transition for our benefit, not because somehow we're done. We go through the transition because our role, when we talk biology, just straight biology, when we go into the fertility years, our biological purpose is to procreate. So in order to do that, we have to find a mate and we procreate. And then our biological purpose is to keep those offspring alive. That's what we're biologically programmed to do. If we're just talking biology, I didn't have children, so I'm not saying you had to do that. I'm just saying biologically. So, most women will remember, that around ovulation, we got a little more zhuzh, like we were like a little whether we wanted kids or not, our biology was like, okay, come on.
Going, here I am, open for business.
Here I am. Now that we're going through the transition, what happens is our ovaries run out of eggs. And when they run out of eggs, they stop producing estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. But our body starts producing estrogen, testosterone, progesterone in a different way. Not because we're done, ladies, but because we have a new purpose. And our new purpose, if you go back to those tribal days, what did the elders do? They taught the younger generations how to survive. It was no longer their job to propagate the species and to keep them alive. Our job now is to teach them how to survive. So we were the midwives, we were the herbalists, we were the tribal leaders.
Yes.
There's a Native American tribe that one of my dear sisters told me about, that she studied with for many years. In their tribe, the men can't go to war without consulting the Women's Council first. Hello, Women's Council?
Wow.
Where is our Women's Council in our world, right?
Yeah.
And so we have forgotten as a culture the purpose of the menopausal years. And because of that, we haven't been researched, it hasn't been looked at, it hasn't been understood. And when you ask women, particularly younger women, to think about the menopausal years and you ask them what comes up for them, you get a lot of blank slates. You get a lot of like downward spirals. You get a lot of I don't knows, right?
Yeah.
And that's a problem. Women, starting from little girls, really should know that we've got 3 phases. We've got our childhood years, and then we move into our purpose of propagating the species and keeping our offspring alive. And then we move into teaching our the younger generations how to survive, what's necessary. So it's really a time when our skill set changes, right?
Absolutely.
We don't need the same skills. Did you have children?
Yes, I did. I've got 2 children.
Okay,
yes.
so remember those superpower skills of like 1,000 things at once, because we got to make, where's the kid, what's it doing, where's the saber-toothed tiger? We don't need those skills anymore. But what we do need to be able to do.
But we do have the school run, which is probably equivalent to fighting the saber-toothed tiger.
Right, exactly, right, exactly. Whatever today,
lunchboxes, uniforms, right? Homework, sports gear, music classes. Where's the husband? Have I got petrol? Have I got food? Yep, we're fighting saber-toothed tigers in those child-rearing years.
It's not our job anymore to take care of them in that same way. So that energy comes back to us. We stop bleeding, which is great, because all the resources that we would lose from every month, every month you'd be like, oh, it's that time I got to rest, the workouts had to get lighter, whatever. We don't lose those resources anymore. So that comes back to us. And then we that need to focus on everybody else, that starts to go away. And all of a sudden we're like, whoa, who am I? And what do I like? And what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And how do I want to give? And what wisdom do I have to share? And sometimes that wisdom might be in the form of art. That wisdom might be being a really amazing grandma. That wisdom might be just getting quiet and meeting the world in a new way. We teach by being, right? We teach by our example. It's not always by being out and talking at people. It's also by how we are. And so it's such a rich, beautiful time for women.
It is.
I don't know anybody who isn't well into it, who's got their body balanced out. I know a lot of women whose body isn't balanced out yet, who are like, oh, I hate this, right? But once that body gets balanced out, I don't know a woman who isn't like, oh, this is good. You're right. I mean, this 3rd season of life, for me, it's like the legacy years. What is the legacy that you want to create? And is that, your family, your love, your work, your writing, your art, whatever it is that you want to put your hand to, that you find purposeful and fulfilling. And these are your legacy years, that you're creating that, because we don't have time to do that in the child rearing years, or the ladies like yourself without children. You're still run off your feet with your careers and climbing whatever corporate ladder or career ladder that you're working on. We're also busy. I remember my stepmom saying to me, I love being a grandma. I walked over, she was on the kitchen floor with her grandchild, with the Tupperware and the spoons, and she's on the kitchen floor with them, and she's like, I love these years. I could never have done this when I was a mom. I never had the time, right? And so it's not about what we're doing. It's about reclaiming our ability to choose what we do. And one of the other beautiful things, that we get back, Kat, is I talk about our sacred no. Because
I like that. I think I know where you're going with this, and I'm liking it already. Yes.
Yeah. So we are actually biologically programmed to please others, because it's part of our role to attracting that mate and keeping our little ones safe and taking care of others. And so we're actually biologically programmed to please and to take care of and say yes to things. That goes away. And we do not have to do that. Now, there can be psychological reasons why women still do that, but we're not biologically driven to do it anymore. And so we might start saying no to our partner in ways we didn't do before. And so this is where men need to hear this. This is normal and this is healthy. And, at first, if you're not feeling good and you're hot flashing, your no might come out a little cranky. But as you step into this phase, as you learn to balance out the body, and we should talk a little bit about that, because that's a big piece for women. we get to say no. We're like, that's not what I want to do. That's not how I want to, spend my day. I love you. It doesn't mean, I had one woman, I was actually doing I was teaching at a group, and the woman whose group it was that I was teaching for, she said, Cari, you talk about how we get to stop taking care of our kids. She goes, but I'm actually kind of more involved in their life, and it's driving me nuts. I go, that's the difference. When you were little, you were happy to be doing it, right?
That's
Now
right.
you're like,
That's
wait,
right.
no, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I said, so you've got to start to exercise that no, and you really have to start to, because you actually handicap them when you don't let them fall down and pick
that's so
themselves up.
true. That's so true. And that's something I know personally that I have to be careful of, because we actually live with my son and his wife and my grandson.
Wow.
Now, the house is kind of physically, so we are physically kind of separate. And my husband, I've had my husband build me a little office studio, which is nearly finished. I've been waiting for a year, simply because we're always in each other's faces, and they need the chance to be able to grow as a family without my husband and I around them all the time. And that's so important for them. And it's important for me too. Otherwise I slip into worrying about, oh, did those guys get enough sleep last night? I could hear them up really late. Oh, is my grandson. And even my daughter-in-law has said to me a few times, you got to remember, if you weren't with us, you wouldn't know these things. You wouldn't see these things. We'd be working them out ourselves. So it's good to learn to be able to put boundaries around ourselves. Like, actually, no, this is the period of time where I don't have to worry about those things. I don't have to carry those things. It's my time, like we said, to create what legacy I want to create and interact.
And it actually, like you said, empowers them, right?
Yes.
And she's got to figure that stuff out,
Yes.
and if we're always there, like, oh, then they don't get to fall down. They feel like they're being watched, right? And so it's so important that we do give them that space to make the mistakes we made, like we had to figure it out. And it's lovely to have family support as well. It's only in the recent years that we don't have tight community around supporting us through those rearing years. So it's the yes and, right? It's both.
It is. But it's interesting because I think you're going to find more and more families become like ours, just due to the cost of living now. There's going to be more intergenerational families. And that's where I think it's kind of cool if women can understand what you're saying and then maybe learn from people like myself who are already in this situation, that we do need to keep those boundaries and not slip back into those middle years of running around pleasing everybody. That sacred no. I love that.
The sacred no. I was my husband is half Croatian. We were there visiting his family, and we went to one of his families, and the whole families all lived together. And this one had a 5-story house, I think it was, 4-story, and each story different. The grandma lived on the bottom floor, and then the one kid, and then each floor was dedicated, but they all had their own kitchens, their own everything, but the whole family. And so there's a beauty in that kind of support. And we also do need the separation too.
Absolutely. So this transition, what we're already seeing is people see it as something fearful, something that's potentially messy, something that we laugh at. Oh, ha, 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 you're having hot sweats, are you? Or things like that. What do you see this transition period as being at? And how could women find support to get through this stage?
Okay. So the most important thing for women to know is that their hormones were being made by their ovaries, and now they're being made by their adrenals, or in support of with their adrenals. Wow. Adrenals are these little organs that sit on top of our kidneys that make stress hormones. So what determines how bumpy it is for someone, the transition, has a lot to do with how stressed their body is under, how much stress their body is under. Now, I call 2 kinds of stress: external stress, the way we respond to our external environment, and internal stress. And there's a lot of lifestyle choices that we make that generate internal stress for us, right? So the secret to feeling good through this time and handling the hot flashes and all of that is to balance out the stress in the body and really figure out what's causing it. And really, so what you're basically doing is actually making yourself healthier. So when you're having symptoms, your body is saying, hey, something's out of balance here. I need some attention and I need some support. So I always call even the imbalance. So even for me, the imbalance is a calling forth into a new way of being, right? And so it's really important that women understand you don't have to suffer through. And for many women, they don't need bioidentical hormones. Some women, if their system is really, like for me, my system was really out of balance because of my previous health experience. And then it got thrown really out of balance when I went to that detox camp. And so a tiny little bit of bioidentical hormone helped me balance back out, because when we don't have enough hormones, it becomes a vicious cycle that's very stressful to the body. And so we end up in this vicious loop. But the majority of women I work with, not the case. You can get their body balanced out without needing the bioidentical hormones.
Wow.
And it's not that there's some people that think every woman should be on them. I don't happen to agree, because I think if the body is balanced and has what it needs, it can make the hormones on its own. But like I said, if there's been a big health journey, or the body's under a lot of stress. I was speaking to a group, and one woman her child had disappeared. And she went to the doctor, and her hormones were really low. And she was like, I don't want to take these hormones. And I looked at her and I said, you know what, right now, take them, because you're under so much stress that it's just not kind to your body. And then when, things get resolved and you find your child, then you can see about getting yourself off of them. But for now, it's just the kindest thing. But for most women, it's not. We have to figure out if their digestive tract has any issues, if their thyroid is out of balance. We have to figure out what's driving the stress. Are they skipping meals? It's a big one. They're not getting enough sleep, all of that. Get their system out of that state of stress, get it back into a state of harmony, and then it will produce the hormones that the body needs during this transition.
Wow. There's so many elements, aren't there?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, if you do go to a doctor, I know from, if you go to a doctor down here, they tend to just treat whatever the symptom is and not look at that whole picture that you're talking about. So if I went to a doctor, which I have done in the past, because I've always struggled with insomnia, the first thing they'll often say is, okay, well, just take half of this tablet diazepam or something like that, right. They won't look at the whole, okay, hang on a minute, you're in menopause, and go from there.
Yeah. And so let's talk about insomnia for a minute. So when we are low on estrogen, our serotonin level goes down. And when our serotonin level goes down, our melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, goes down, right? So there's one cause. If we're not making enough progesterone because our adrenals are too stressed out, progesterone is a precursor to GABA, which is a calming neurotransmitter. And GABA, when it's low, norepinephrine goes up, which is a stress hormone. So right there, you've got two major pathways that affect our ability to sleep. And then if our melatonin level goes down, our cortisol level goes up, or if our cortisol level goes up, a stress hormone, melatonin, goes down. So we end up in this vicious loop. So making sure that there are enough hormones, and then what's out of balance, and then why it's out of balance. So just taking the hormones doesn't fix the why. It might help you sleep better, which it can be great. If you're not sleeping, that's a big vicious loop, right? But it doesn't. Why is the body under stress in the first place? Why is it not producing these? So we always want to go to the next layer under and go to the why, because if you don't fix that will just perpetually drain your body, right? And you'll end up in a premature aging scenario. So we want to look at all of it. It's, I'm creating a course right now to help women through this transition. And I don't talk about sex hormones until like the end of the course, and for most people, that's the first place they go. But from my perspective, there's a reason your body's not producing them. We want to find out what that reason is and correct those things. And then, if we need a little bit, okay, but otherwise you're just leaving your body in a state of stress. Right.
Wow. So, gosh, there's so many things there, and we probably need to put a caveat or a disclaimer in right now, folks, that we're not giving medical advice here too. Probably should have popped that at the beginning. We're talking just in general, and Dr. Cari is just talking in general here. And if anything she says really, really, really comes to your attention, please, by all means, either reach out to her to find out what your next steps would be, or go see your trusted family doctor and take it from there. So disclaimer out there, okay?
Disclaimer, None of this is medical advice. It's not telling you what to do. It's just saying that, that there's a reason we're out of balance, and we want to find that reason, and then we want to recreate balance in the system. And maybe we need a little bioidentical, maybe we don't. That's not the question. The question really is, what's throwing the system out of balance?
So what would be in general, so you're talking about going to the next level. So I come to you, I'm someone who's we've talked about earlier, someone who's put on weight, struggles with sleep issues, certainly has heightened anxiety compared to whatever I used to have before.
Right.
And it's actually something that I have noticed in myself, not to that extent, but that's interesting that you shared that. I'm trying to think of some other common sort of things. Oh yeah, the odd night sweats, hot flushes.
Feeling
Okay.
warm.
So I'm coming to you. Yeah. What do you do? What is this next level that you're diving into, other than just going and getting a blood test and then doing what you're told? What?
Yeah, I have people fill out a questionnaire, and the questionnaire goes through every system, not every, but most of the systems in the body.
Yeah.
What I'm looking for are areas of stress. And so let's say that somebody comes up and they filled out a lot of points in the digestive area. Then we do a little sleuthing to see what's going on there. And I might recommend a lab test where we really look at digestion. Or let's say their thyroid is looking off, but they say, oh, my doctor, has already tested my thyroid. And I'll say, well, let me look at those tests. And very often their doctor hasn't looked at all the possible imbalances in a thyroid.
Right. Yes.
So then I'm like, okay, let's look at your thyroid, right? And then when women that are in their late 40s or 50s, I do run a hormone, because if the hormones are really low, that's a stressor in and of itself. So we need to get that balance while we are fixing the other stuff, so to speak, so that just to get people out of the suffering, right? Because it really can feel like suffering.
What about other things? Again, I'm probably thinking of myself and other people I've talked to. Like, I've lived with chronic pain for the last 15 years, and I've since had surgery to help a little bit with it, but it was in the pelvic area. But, I read a lot about pain being connected to inflammation. Can that be exacerbated? Because that's been basically my whole menopause. So I've not necessarily been aware of a lot of the other symptoms because I was always just so preoccupied with the pain that I was living with.
Yeah. So when estrogen levels go down, inflammation goes up.
Right.
So that would be one thing that would be interesting with you, is to look at that, the levels. And again, it doesn't mean that hormone replacement's the only way, but if they're very low, it might be really helpful in getting that inflammation. The other thing, so when we look at like the weight, there's 7 to 9 factors that you have to look at during this phase to see whether or not. Yeah, it's a big topic. I've done I taught an entire week course just on that topic.
Yeah.
But basically all we're doing is we're looking for, like you're talking about this pain, wonder, sort of what would be the root cause of that? Where was you said in your pelvic region, right?
Yeah.
So to me, I go to your digestive tract because that's the root of inflammation. I get really curious about that, right? And so this is what we do. And then we just start going, oh, no, that's actually okay. Oh, wait, what about over here? Oh, wait, there's something going on there. And then we go about supporting the body to balance it out. That's the game. And when those things start to balance out, like hot flashes, women who have hot flashes who try taking like, some black cohosh or, things like that, some herbs, and they're not helping, usually there's an infection in their system that are causing, because what starts to happen, why we get cold and hot flashes during this time, is we have a temperature gap and it narrows as our hormones narrow. It narrows, and so we feel hotter faster. And so if we have an immune challenge and our body tries to raise our temperature to get rid of it, we start hot flashing. And I see that all the time with women who just have these hot flashes they just can't get rid of because there's a hidden immune challenge that they don't know about. We identify that, and then we're able to get them straightened out. So
Wow. See, I've not heard that before. It's always just been, oh, well, some get it, some don't. Luck of the draw.
No. There's a cause, and we can balance it out. And if you're a person who doesn't really have them, and then you start noticing that you're having a little night sweats, there's something stressing your body out. Just know that. Oh, something's stressing my body out. Okay, maybe you have a little cold, or maybe you have a little urinary thing going on, or maybe you ate tuna fish that has a bunch of heavy metals in it, or I saw that the other day. The woman had actually swallowed her silver filling, and it was stressing her system out. So you just know that means your system's under a little bit of stress.
Yeah. Okay. That's fascinating. All right, I've got another one for you. Again, I'm using myself a bit as the example because, hey, I'm here and it's legally me talking about me. So it's all
exactly.
good. Okay, so I'm one of those odd people too. Like I had a shocking history growing up, right from when I got my first period. So men listening, too much information here, put your fingers in your ears or whatever, or just deal with it. Age 11, I got my first period, and right from then it was horrendous. So there's too much to tell you, but we're talking massive clotting, incredible pain. Ended up with a hysterectomy at 38. When they
Oh,
opened me
wow.
up, there was chronic endometriosis. All my organs were glued together with endo,
Oh,
and I had
no
adhesions
wonder
because
you
I'd
have
ended up
pelvic
with,
pain. Yeah.
yeah, I had
Yeah.
adhesions as well, from cesarean sections, and everything was a right mess. So, and then the pelvic pain then really kicked in, a different type, after that hysterectomy, and that's what I've had for all these last couple of years. It totally changed my life. I stopped working in the gym. I basically
Mm.
have been working from a recliner, become more of a recluse, just simply because of the pain. I couldn't sit up on
Oh,
chairs, I couldn't
wow.
travel,
Right.
constant medication. But the problem is, um, okay, number one, having that hysterectomy at 38. So that left me pretty clueless as to where I was as far as as
Yeah.
far
Did you
as
have a full or
menopause.
did you have a
I didn't. I
partial?
still had my ovaries. Everything else
Okay.
was gone. So I know that I was still producing, and especially for those first couple of years, I could tell when I was still cycling, just from
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
different things. But it
My
got to the point.
observation is women will cycle, and
Yeah.
it does tend to sort of send them into menopause a little bit
Yes.
earlier than they might have if they had everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I
But
was
yes,
told
you
that
are
would be the
still
case.
cycling. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because then when I finally went and had this next surgery, so what's this, 15, nearly 20 years later, but just this last December, and
Mhm.
just to see physically if there was anything else
What was
contributing
going
to this
on?
life-changing pain. And it was interesting. They actually found everything glued together again with adhesions, probably from the hysterectomy now. So there was a lot of stuff there that they were able to deal with. And we were talking about Botox before we press record. Here's another too much information for everybody listening. I now have the smoothest vagina in New Zealand because they gave me 10 Botox shots right across my pelvic floor to try and release the constant spasm that my body's in because it's been in pain for so long. So that I can
Wow.
actually go to a pelvic physiotherapist and try and get some therapy. So it's been a journey. It's been an interesting
Yeah,
couple
it
of
has.
months.
Did they take out the adhesions?
Yes, they did. They took it, and that was quite long and convoluted. One of the ovaries had gone walkabout and all sorts of fun things. But the thing was, in all of that, they did blood tests and all of that, and immediately said, well, yeah, you're past menopause, so we can't do anything for you there, basically. Let's just go do this surgery and see what we find. So thankfully they actually found things. It was
Mm,
wonderful to feel validated, like, wow,
yeah,
this pain I've been living with that's reduced my life so much. It's kind of
yeah.
nice to know that it was valid. The surgeon
Right, you're
actually
like
said
making it
that,
up. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, the surgeon actually said to my husband, when he called him, like, wow, no wonder she was in pain. So that was kind of good to know.
Wow.
But
Has
I
it
still got
helped?
this whole, you're not in menopause, like, and yet I know that I'm still dealing with other things, other menopause symptoms, like, weight gain, insomnia, the odd hot flush. So what happens when a woman's done the blood test though, and they say, well, you're not in menopause now, deal with it? Can
You're
women like me still do things to change our symptoms?
absolutely. So why are they saying that? How are they saying you're 50, what
I'm
age?
57, so I'm 58 later this year.
And
And
so your mom go into the menopause?
well, that's the problem. My mother had a hysterectomy at 39.
Okay. Oh yeah,
So
that
there's a family history there. So we've got these blurred lines where we don't quite know what's happening because that was such a major incident, in our health.
yeah.
And I know
But
that there'll be so many women out there like me who have been through surgery like that or different events. And literally the doctors, just out of curiosity, when they were prepping me for this whole surgical process, they were looking at all my markers and they just said to me, oh, well, you've had menopause, you're done. But I'm still getting symptoms.
well, so the thing to understand is that menopausal syndrome is what it's called when it's
Yeah.
imbalanced, can happen anytime in menopause. It happens during perimenopause. I actually call it perimenopausal syndrome, just to clarify for
Yeah.
women, but it can happen anytime in menopause. And it's anytime the body is under stress, because when the body's under stress, the adrenals stop making the hormones because they're busy dealing with the stress state. The body's always prioritizing towards survival. So like I had a woman, she was 70 and she was still getting hot flashes, really bad one, and really bad insomnia. And I'm happy to say that she's sleeping now and her hot flashes are gone. But for her, what ended up finding was heart disease. She had almost complete blockage in her arteries. And I'm not saying that, certainly not what's going on with you. I'm just saying that when the body's under stress, no matter what age, heart disease, not having enough oxygen, is obviously much more important to the body than whether or not it's making hormones. So anytime during menopause, you can have what I call menopausal syndrome. Things can go out of balance as we get further in and the body figures it out, but tends to do it less, right? You just had a major surgery, so your body is still like, whoa, what's going on here, right? And so that's super important. You might do a little research about castor oil packs on your belly to help you. It's an Edgar Cayce remedy. And that might help you not reform scar tissue, because that's a big thing for you, right?
Yes. I know that the doctor did apply something. He said that obviously they got advances from when I had my hysterectomy. So so there's so many different areas where women struggle, with particular issues, and it's interesting. And you're saying that can continue. So even into your 60s, even into your 70s, you can still be getting symptoms.
If you don't find the source and you don't, resolve it, then it can continue. Usually the average woman, if she's having symptoms after 10 years, it's gone. But what we really have to do is, if it's not balancing out, not going away, there's something going on in your system that is is throwing it out of balance. And we want to find out what that is and then get the body balance back out so that you don't have to continue to suffer. The platform Wise Women Emerging, for a woman who's suffering with symptoms, they could care less about their wise woman, right? They just want to, they want to feel better. But once we get the body balanced out, then these other gifts of this time of life can start to show themselves. And then we can start to be like, oh, this is kind of lovely. What do I want to do with my life? What's my legacy? What imprint do I want to leave on this planet? And it can be just the loveliest time of a woman's life. Just really so lovely.
I think, you kind of nailed it right there in that bit. It really is sorting out your health, sorting out your boundaries, and then absolutely embracing this time, isn't it? Just
it is. It really
getting those things done. And I think for probably some driven overachiever types, and that's me included, we tend to burn the candle at both ends for so long that I think it must play out in this season.
And when you go through the transition, it becomes a problem, right? When I was in school, I learned that 15% of Asian women had hot flashes. I just looked at the Australian numbers, and the Australian numbers are even higher than that, of Western women. And I just looked recently, and now the numbers at China is 18%, and Korea is 30%, but we're still up in our 75 percentile, right? And I think that has partially to do with the Asian cultures revere their elders, right? And in our culture, we don't have much time for them. We don't value. We don't value them. And so that I think is part of it. I don't know enough about their lifestyles nowadays to know how much stress they're under. I know that they're still using their traditional medicines. They have a lot of support, in that way, which we don't. But it's fascinating, right? That it's such a drastic difference between Western women and Asian women, the difference in their experience of this time.
Yeah. So just as we start to wrap up, so obviously if for anyone listening in who's getting symptoms, what would you tell them to do?
So the first thing, I want you to look around your life, and I want you to look at your stress level and evaluate that. number one, evaluate your stress level, okay? And look around what's causing your stress level. Now, a major source of stress for women during this time is meal skipping, because every time we don't have enough glucose, which is what our body uses, unless we're doing the ketogenic diet, which is a whole nother story, but our body uses glucose to make energy. Every time we don't have enough, it's an emergency situation. Our body releases stress hormones. We then start feeling anxious and, shaky and all that. If you're a person who notices that when you skip meals, or it's a little later and you get like shaky, that's a sign that your adrenal system is taxed. So that's the first place. It's just look around, make sure you're feeding yourself at least 3 times a day. If you're worried about gaining weight, then you want to keep your portions smaller than what we used to do. We don't need as many calories now as we used to. What a lot of women will do is they'll eat 1 meal a day, and then they'll make that one meal 1,000 calories, which is still a low calorie count, but 1,000 calories all at once. Actually, if the body has more glucose in the moment than it needs, it makes body fat, right? So you could fast all day, eat a meal that's too big, and your body will store body fat. So
really, that's interesting, because I mean, when I was working as a personal trainer, that's when intermittent fasting first came in, and I mean, I was all over it because I read all the books and all the science, and that was great. But I did wonder, when you get into older women menopause, if it was the right thing to do or not, or how to manage that.
I don't think it is. There are some women who are fine with it, but I don't think that it is, because unless maybe you're on high levels of bioidentical hormones, because it just disrupts the hormonal production, right? And keeps the body in a stress state. So I do not recommend it. And so that's a big one right there, is just get your eating habits regulated.
Yeah.
And then another really big one is the sleep habits. If you're not sleeping, if you're going to bed before 10 or before 11 and you're trying to sleep and you're not, then you have to look at do you have darkness in your room? Are you watching screens too late into the night? All that kind of stuff. But if that's not the case, then there may be a hormonal imbalance that's aggravating it. So sleep's a super important one. And then we do need to move. We have to move these bodies. There's so many reasons why moving is so important. So, I've been doing this medicine for a long time. I'm in my 23rd year. We went down this rabbit hole in the functional medicine world of autoimmune, trying to fix it. And here, take this pill and take this pill. And there's this one point where I was like, I just started going, I'd go to these trainings and I'd be like, people were not going to fix it with another pill. And then what they started realizing is, it's lifestyle. And I was like, well, no wonder I haven't had trouble with these types of things in my practice, because I'm a lifestyle-based practice, right? It's all about how you think, what you eat, and what you put in your body, what you put on your body, how you move your body. That's how I practice. And because that's what got me well, right? And so you really want to look around your life, and most of the time we know, know, hey, we know the thing.
It's true. It's true.
We really do need to do to balance ourselves out. And then if we know and we can't do it, we try and we can't, there's something that I call outdated survival programming. It's programs that make us make choices that aren't our frontal brain's going, what am I doing that for? Because we have a program that says, hey, do this, it'll help you survive in some way, shape, or form. So then you want to find somebody. There's a technique called neuro-emotional technique. And I know that they train people in Australia, and there might be somebody in New Zealand that's brilliant at helping work with that stuff. I work online as well, but you want to find those programs so that you can start being free to make the choices that are good for you, right?
Wow, so much there. I was right about all the little gems that you would be dropping through this. We could go for ages and ages.
Well, you're going to have to tell your listeners, I am 3/4 of the way through my book, your Menopause Midwife book. And I've got a course that I'm developing to help people. So these are all coming down the pipe. So
brilliant. As usual, I will have all of Cari's links and her full biography and all of her information in the notes on the YouTube channel, on the podcast notes, and also at the blog. So you can go and seriously get in this lady's world. If you are having any symptoms whatsoever, save yourself the drama of waiting years thinking, it's not getting any better, and being frustrated. Go start learning about this now.
You don't the idea of just wait, it'll pass, not a good idea.
I mean, I wish I'd known you and a few other wonderful ladies I've had on the podcast too. I wish I'd known what I know now back in my
Right.
early 40s. You know, it could have changed so much, even this pain that I've lived with all these years. But, you know, if my journey can then help someone else avoid this, and by bringing people like you out and shining a light on you, if it can help women, then I'm wrapped.
And I want to thank you, Kat, for being so honest, because a lot of people don't talk about, you know, the nitty gritty. And it was one of my things when I was studying a lot and being trained. They'd always talk about the miracle cases, but they never talked about being in the trenches. And you know what? Being in the trenches is how you help other people learn how to be in the trenches, right? And I was in the trenches with my health for a long time. You were in the trenches with your health for a long time. And then getting out of the trenches and being like, okay, how, you know, what are the things that got, you know, that helped us, that got us out? That's what's, to me, what's important to share. Not that we have to always talk about our pain stories, but at the same time, there's a lot of people out there that are in pain and they need to hear. I spent one of my big parts of my health journey was pain. So I understand. I really do.
Yeah. I think there might be a whole nother conversation around that one.
Whole nother conversation.
Because you're right. There's so many women, you know, we do talk about menopause now, but we don't talk about the hard stuff. And there are so many women going through the hard stuff, living with chronic pain or chronic syndromes or illnesses or things like that.
And there's a way out.
Yeah.
There's a way out. I could give you my resume of sicknesses, and I've had a lot of them.
Yeah.
And there's a way out. And that's what women need to hear. You don't have to suffer through this time. This is really actually a gift for you this time. And there are things that can help you feel better. So.
And there we have it. Thank you so much, Cari. This has just been fabulous. And, you know, I've just had one word buzzing in my head just during the last 10 minutes or so, and that's the word hope. And my heart for this conversation particularly is that it gives listeners hope that, you know, what Cari's shared about, that you can get help, that all these different things that you've been putting up with and dealing with in silence, thinking it's just you, there's something wrong with you. And I know that feeling. In fact, I might lose it in a minute. I know what it feels to think there's no hope, but there is hope. Wow.
There's hope. There is hope. Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, it's I've been there too, right? And there is hope. So
there is.
Oh,
so thank you again. I'm gonna stop this recording before I lose the plot totally. Thank you so much again, everybody. Please make sure to like, to subscribe. Please leave a review. Share this episode, especially with other sisters that you know are struggling with this season in their life. And here is to, despite everything else that's going on, here is to rocking our midlife season and beyond.